As always, thank you so much, Dio, for that warm introduction and start. Um, Unfortunately, we're starting a little bit late, but we will see what we can do to still finish within the time we have slotted, because we do recognize that certain people have other programs on a Saturday, and we would not like to keep you longer than we or you had either planned or so on. Now, some people may wonder, what has the tongue got to do with this issue when we talk about managing cerebral palsy? Well, let me start first by saying that over the years, we have tried to ask our parents to submit topics which they would like us to talk about. We are yet to get a topic from any of our parents. But with time, as we conduct our program of CP Thursday, where parents share their stories, and also follow parents that are now posting or sharing their stories on social media, questions arise, which we think we need to talk about. And that's how come we come up with these topics. And by the grace of God, we will continue to find good topics. When you send yours, it would also help us to dilute into something that hopefully most people will find interesting. So today we're talking about the tongue. And as you know, the tongue is one of the most active muscles in the human body, which is why it plays such a serious role in cerebral palsy. The fact that our children drool, the fact that most of them cannot speak or swallow, etc., has to do with the tongue. I may come across one or two other issues as we go on, but let's stick to it. And what we'll find is that the tongue itself is a very powerful tool. If this picture can give us a clear indication of the tongue, what we'll see is that it is a muscular organ in the mouth that is covered with moist pink tissue called mucosa. Tiny bumps called papillae give the tongue its rough texture. Thousands of taste buds cover the surface of the papillae. It is a digestive organ that moves food around our mouth to help us chew and swallow. It also helps us make different sounds so we can speak and form words clearly. That's why somebody with tongue missing cannot make a sound, or at least an audible sound. Finally, it helps keep our airway open so we can breathe properly. This is very important because when people start getting older, or when you develop, some people have the heavy tongue, as you sleep and you relax, the muscles on the side of the tongue can also relax to the extent that the tongue can actually cover the airway. And that's why a lot of mature people, and even some young ones, snore. It's a way to show that the air passage is being closed. And when that happens, you have a buildup of carbon monoxide. And this carbon monoxide triggers something in the brain that kind of says, hey, wake up. Because if you don't, you could just pass away from that accumulation of carbon monoxide in your system. The parts of the tongue. What we find here is that there's a part of the tongue that's called the epithelium, which comprises papillae and our taste buds. The muscles, these are voluntary and contain cross-strained muscular fibers. That's why you find that you can carry out all kinds of gestures with your tongue voluntarily, but there are a lot of also involuntary things that happen. Glands, it consists of small and scattered glands which are used for, supplying feelings to the nerves. Masticulation, the tongue helps us to chew. You can imagine if all you have is your teeth, then how will you chew? Anybody who has watched goats, you will see how their mouth moves from side to side as they're chewing cord, grass, because you must move it around. Saliva must get involved and create a kind of paste that it becomes easy to swallow. And of course, at the end of the day, the digestion helps. So that's the one that calls deglutition, which helps us to swallow. Then taste. Taste is very important because taste signals to the brain and it helps us to know whether something is good to eat or whether it's going to be okay for us and so on, which is why you find that medication for children are naturally sweetened so that they become attractive for the children. And so they can respond to it very well. And of course, if it's bitter, then it's very, very difficult to get them to take it or swallow it. Speech is, of course, a very important organ. The tongue, without it, like I said, if you can see there, will not be possible. And then you have the secretion of mucus and other fluid, which keeps our mouth moist. Without the moist, the mouth will go dry. In fact, as you get older, and those who know me will know that I always have a cup with me, because every once in a while, especially when I'm talking, I have to take a little sip of water or fluid just to continue to stop my mouth from going completely dry. And that's why also it is highly recommended that at public speaking functions, that a glass and a bottle of water is placed on the podium for each speaker, just to avoid a situation where their throat goes dry or they have problems with what they're trying to say. So you can see the functions here: mastication, deglutition, taste, speech, and secretion. So what's the bottom line? The tongue is used for tasting. It is used for chewing. It is used for swallowing. It is used for speech. So you can understand when a child with CP has difficulty in controlling the tongue. All these four functions that I've mentioned will be difficult for that poor child. Then we have the four common tastes in that the tongue can taste includes sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. A fifth taste, which is called umami, results from tasting glutamate, a substance that is present in MSG or monosodium glutamate. And many of you will remember until MSG became popular in Nigeria, it was that thing that, our caterers used to add to their food. It replaces salt, but it brings in a much more pleasant taste. And that's why some people used to say, oh, that caterer, that mama puts food tastes better than the one we put at home. Of course, when the secret came out, everybody started using it until NAFDAC had to put a warning that it has to be used in the right proportions and it could result in certain problems and all to the person. The power of the tongue. Words are containers of power that create action. They build up or they tear down. Words have the power to bring life or death, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. This is not magical. It's a matter of cause and effect. Let's look at them one by one. Physically, words can bring life through encouragement or a kind and proper warning. For example, a person gives hope to a suicidal person, somebody who is depressed, and somebody who is even thinking of maybe killing their child or stuff like that. A doctor is able to advise someone on life-saving surgery or convince a person. You see, nobody really likes surgery because surgery has side effects. I have known personally quite a number of people who have gone in for surgery, and the surgical procedure was okay. But eventually, they did not come out of surgery because of the anesthesia. They reacted to the anesthesia. And so you find many people who say, I don't want to do surgery, or I don't do it. So it takes a good doctor to convince you of the life-saving effects of surgery. We also have, you look at the weather, you look at the news on radio and television, and it warns you about weather, advising you on what precautions to take so as not to be caught on the wrong side of town or on the road and so on. In fact, it has been proven many times that physical death can be the result of hateful words or words spoken in rage or anger. Some of you must have watched movies where people have been told, be careful what you say. You're in a fit of anger, you tell somebody, I will deal with you. And then the person leaves the house, falls or runs into something and dies. If there was a witness when you said that, then you become the #1 suspect. Even though you say, I didn't do anything, but you threatened the person. And that can be difficult to get away with in court. Emotional. You see, what we say has a profound impact on other people's hearts. A soothing thought, that is speaking words that build up and encourage, is a tree of life. But a pervasive tongue, that one that speaks words that overwhelm and depress and crushes the spirit, does the complete opposite. You see, words that carry life can bring the dead emotions in our bodies back to life through healing. It's very important because, these days one finds a lot of people trying to be counselors. Somebody comes out with an emotional outburst on social media, and everybody's trying to say, can I speak to you? Can I call you? Can I do this and do that? It is nice. But then we have to be careful about how we get involved, because only those who have the right experience, the right training, will be able to do the right kind of counseling or provide the right kind of emotional support that will help these individuals come out of this bad state of depression they have. The question is, we have choices. And someone can ask, can we control our tongue? Yes, we can. by thinking what we want, but saying only what is appropriate. So learn to stand by the advice if you don't have anything to say. Don't say anything at all. If you cannot think of anything positive to say, then just smile. Smile politely, nod your head, and subtly find a way to change the subject to one in which you're more comfortable. Someone may ask, can we tame our tongue? And the answer is, yes, we can. And the way to tame our tongue is to learn verbal control. You see, if you have a habit of saying whatever comes to mind and making others mad or hurting their feelings without even meaning to, or perhaps the problem is not your wild tongue, but someone else that you know and care about, whether it is you or someone else that needs to control what they say, learning to think about what is said and the impact of a wild tongue can help tame it. Another thing is to think about your motives. Figuring out why and when you have a wild tongue can help you to tame it by recognizing situations in which it is likely to happen. Think about why your first reaction is to say something rude or mean. Consider whether your tongue runs wild in certain situations or around particular people. Does being around a particular person or people cause your tongue to run wild? For example, does one annoying co-worker make you want to tell him or her off? Are you seeking attention? Have you found out this is a way to get people to notice you, for better or worse? Does it happen more often when you are nervous, stressed, or defensive? What about alcohol and substances that lower our inhibitions? You see, sometimes being uninhibited by alcohol can actually cause us to say things we regret. Consider if alcohol is a factor in losing your tongue, and if so, limit or completely avoid alcohol when you are in situations in which you are concerned about your wild tongue. Another thing is becoming a listener. Many people who continuously offend spend a lot of time talking and very little time listening. But if we tame our wild tongue by making conscious choices to listen when someone else is talking rather than thinking about what we can say in return, that would actually help. Listening to the person can give us hints as to what topics might be sensitive areas that we should avoid. So we should try asking the person an open-ended question in place of responding, such as, what did you do then? Or how are you feeling about it? We should avoid sensitive topics like finances, race, romance, religion, politics, and so on. See, if we're speaking to people outside of the close-knit circle, especially people that we don't know that well, these topics could relate to their beliefs and values. So our wild tongue can trigger anger and cause such people to become extremely offended. If other people are talking about these things, they just remain out of the conversation. If possible, steer the conversation in another safer direction. And if you absolutely must comment, then remember to take a 10-second pause to think about what you are trying to say and the impacts that it might have. In all instances, remember, some things said as a joke or sarcasm can be interpreted as discriminatory. So the question is, can we stop speaking our mind? Well, that's $1 million question. Because in short, we can, but it is not easy. To start it, we should understand that us human beings feel like we have to say exactly what is on our mind, always, due to a sense of urgency. Try pausing and being more conscientious about the intention behind your thoughts before you speak, as your words can hurt others. Learn to be patient with yourself. You see, your tongue might slip a little, but if you keep working at it, you will eventually learn to tame it. Let me give you an example here. Whether you see, when you want to crack a joke in a sensitive country like Nigeria, you must be careful whether the joke is about a particular tribe or the joke is about a particular religion, etc., etc. I have caught myself many times when I'm cracking a crazy joke, and just before I reach the punchline, I suddenly realize that, oh boy, you see, when you live in Lagos, you have a lot of Igbo friends who speak Yoruba so well that you actually forget that they're Igbo. Or you have friends that are very tolerant, that they even attend like a church service and so on, but they're Muslims. And if you're not really close to them, if you're not comfortable with them, you could crack a joke that would raise tempers unnecessarily. And so, as you're even trying to track a joke, or as you're talking to people, you must consciously think about, where am I? Who am I with? What's the environment in which I'm staying? And with experience, you will be able to catch yourself and kind of just change the topic without exactly landing, as they would say, and you're making a choice. The truth is that we have choices. You see, the issue of life and death has always been a choice. From the beginning, God has always given humanity a choice between life and death. In the Garden of Eden, He set the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the center of the garden for man, Adam and Eve, to make their choices. Even for those who are familiar with the story of the Israelites, before Moses led the children of Israel into the promised land, they were offered the choice between life and death, between going forward and going back to a comfortable life, so to speak, in slavery. A lot of human beings have a problem with making choices. And that's why there's a general popular talk about, to make progress in life, you must be hungry. Hungry for what? Hungry for a better life. Hungry for something more. You must be willing to think outside the box. That is, to do something different from what everybody else is doing. You must be able to look within your problem and see an option and see a solution, which only you may be the one seeing. But that can be a difficult thing to do. You see, no human being can tame the tongue, because it is a restless evil full of deadly poison. You see, it's easy to say, okay, look at your child with a disability, with cerebral palsy, who has difficulty in taking their medication, who easily spills their food or even the expensive medication and not get upset. But one thing that I have learned, both from my family and from thousands of families that we have been fortunate to interact with directly or indirectly through social media, is that you can easily see that home where there's joy because the child radiates joy. Where does laughter come from? Laughter comes from within us, but it exercises the muscles on the sides of our cheeks. And as we laugh, as we smile, as we stay positive, the face reflects it in how the child looks, and so on. I'm sure we all heard about the fact that there is body language. Body language does not just mean hand, legs, and all, it means also the face. And so as we look into somebody who is disabled, look at them, look into their faces, are likely to see signs of acceptance, or we're also likely to project signs of tolerance, acceptance, as against that of revulsion and that of discomfort and so on. And when we project the right facial expressions to them, they also feel loved and they project something better of themselves and so on. The same thing when we speak good. It is well with you. You will be fine. Well done. Clap for yourself. Clap for Junior. Things like that. They react positively. But when we use words like you will never do that. There's no point sending this child to school, even though we think they're not listening. They could be in the next room, but they're hearing. When parents are fighting, and honestly, I understand this issue. When mommy wants to go for all kinds of therapies and treatments and buy all kinds of medications, and daddy is worrying about the financial implications, there are times when tempers rise up in the home. We have to be very careful how we manage these things so that negatives don't come out of our mouths. So, how do we choose life? The way to choose life and tame our tongues is deeply rooted in our religious beliefs. Take, for instance, the Bible tells us that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And that through him, the word was made flesh. What word? The word of God. He tells us that we need to do, what we need to do to tame our tongue is to pay attention to what is in our hearts. You see, a good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart. And an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. What you say flows from what is within your heart. See, this goes back to the issue of body language. It is difficult for you to look at a child that is drooling and be repulsed by it and try to smile. It just doesn't work. You can try, but the child feels it. One of the things that I have found very interesting is that a lot of parents with children with cerebral palsy, when they meet me for the first time, even at events where I need to run around and make sure things are going well, they just automatically hand the child over to me. So I have to carry the child for a while. And eventually find a way of saying, I have to do some other things. I have to attend to some other people. I even remember there was a father, his son was 14 years old, and for 13 years, they didn't have any other child. But once he started following the donor, one thing or the other happened. Because you see, a lot of parents, if this child with CP is their first child, there's always a reluctance to have another child, out of fear that the other child will likely have the same problem. And so by the time the guy was 14 years old, the mother had given birth to lovely twins, a boy and a girl, that were touched with perfectly normal. So this gentleman reached out to me after about a 2-year break and invited me for the naming ceremony. And I wonder why he was doing that, but I just out of curiosity, I agreed. I said, I will attend. And it's very far from where I live in Aja. It's Akwonwojo, which is about 3.5 hours drive from Aja. I think he showed it to his wife. And the woman now sent me a WhatsApp to thank me. And that got me even more curious that what's going on. I didn't know the whole story. But when I got there that Sunday, after a long drive, then he narrated what happened and why they wanted me there. He even introduced me to the audience as like that man that encouraged them to go ahead and try again. But the most interesting thing is that the 14-year-old could feed himself. He was not verbal, but he could feed himself. He could move around independently. And so where I was sitting, he just brought him to sit next to me. And for the next 1.5 hours that I was there with them, the boy was, you know, he came a few times to speak with me, but it was like the boy was my chief host and so on. Like I said, it's interesting. And there are people who will tell you that when they see somebody who responds well to their child with special needs, it's very heartwarming because there are too many people in our society who don't respond well to them. We've also had interaction with a lot of adults living with cerebral palsy and other disabilities. And those of them that are verbal will tell you the same thing, that there are very few people who really genuinely care about them or would like to interact with them. We have cases of some of them trying to enter public transport and nobody wants them on the bus. Or I remember one case where one lady wanted to enter an Uber with a friend of hers. And the driver looked at them and said, nope, I can't carry this one, and just sped up. These are very hurtful things. These are very difficult things for these special individuals to cope with. And so I think it is important that we all understand that we have a role to play in teaching as we manage ourselves, as we manage our utterances, as we control our tongues, as we speak positives in our home. It will spread. It will spread in our home. It will spread in our society. So when we talk about, you know, we're talking about, a lot of people are now talking about inclusion. You can't include if you don't teach people acceptance. And to have acceptance, we must teach them the true situation. Because a lot of people are afraid of, let's say a child is drooling. That saliva, is it contagious? This situation, is it infectious? It is those of us who have taken time to learn, to understand who can do this. And that's where there's power in our tongue. So everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, let's get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent and humbling accept the word planted in us, which can definitely save us. So what have I said? To control our tongue, let's think about our motives. Use of alcohol or other substances that get us entertained should be reduced. We should become listeners. Avoid sensitive topics. Because the fruit of the Spirit, which is in us, which can help change all these things, is love, joy, peace, and forgiveness. In addition, this fruit of the Spirit, which should come out of us, is kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. When we are able to imbibe and project these qualities, then virtually everything we say will be. So let's understand that the tongue has no bones, but it is strong enough to break a heart. So let's be careful with our words. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. It is our power to choose and speak life. So every time we have the opportunity, let us speak life. Words are powerful. They can create or they can destroy. So each time you speak, please choose your words. Thank you.